Next question. Name withheld by request. What's the difference between Tony Khan and Dixie Carter? Honestly, is there really any difference in how they bought into and ran their respective wrestling companies?
Well, I read this question before, and what's the difference between Tony Khan and Dixie Carter? First off, is the anatomy. that's a difference. But the overriding question is about $3 billion. That's the difference between them. Dixie bought into TNA, and originally she wasn't in it. They had some other investors, and this investor worked with. He was the head of an insurance firm in Alabama. And it was only, they got started. I forgot when they started. But the guy who was invested the money from the insurance company, that's what he did. They all of a sudden, he came under federal indictment for fraud and embezzlement. So that threw that damn investment completely up in the air. And then now Jeff and his father, Jerry, now they're looking for an investor. And this is not cheap. You're talking $1 million back then. And it was just a regional company. And Jeff knew Dixie somehow. And he talked to her about, would she be interested? And she thought a minute. She said, no, but my father might. And her father ran a big oil rigging company in Texas.
Panda Energy.
Panda Energy, that's what he ran. And Dixie was in Nashville trying to run I think, a booking agency for some stars there. She wanted to do that.
PR firm or something, wasn't it?
Something like that. And so when Jeff went in to talk to her one morning, and she's listening to it, she says, be ready at the airport in the morning at 8:00, and we'll fly down and we'll meet with my dad on a private plane. I mean, this guy had money, big time money. So they met over there. Jerry met and Jeff met, and they got on the plane with Dixie, and they went down there, and they closed the deal in one day. And the old man Carter, what was his first? What was his name? Bob Carter, I think. They closed it, and then that's how Dixie Carter entered the wrestling business. She knew absolutely nothing about it, and she would be influenced by some of the talent because she was a good-looking woman, and they would see her around, and they'd go and the talent they'd go and talk to her, and she would get to liking them. Then they would get on like a first name basis where the guy could take his problems to Dixie. And he could take a problem like, well, they're not really using me that well. And I got this idea. And they'd tell it to her, of course. Oh, that's great. That's beautiful. Then she would come and kind of present that idea that we had already rejected. But now you got to deal with her. And then we'd have to do something with the guy. But she got involved in ways that she shouldn't have got involved in. And but that was just something we had to deal with. I was on creative. Vince Russo was on creative. Jeff was on creative. And when we booked the shows, we would go out and to Jeff's house. That's a whole story all unto itself. And
there was a story. Sorry for butting in. How big was Jerry Jarrett's dining table?
How big was it?
Yeah, there's a story that he had like the biggest dining table in Henderson, Tennessee, or something like that. I don't know.
I never saw his dining table.
Oh, okay.
Because by the time I got, they were still in Hendersonville. And I used to go over to Jerry's house, but years before this. So, and I'm getting to the point with Dixie that they had a lot of friction within the company, and it was between Vince and Dixie and Jeff. Again, I'm going to fall back on my line. I tried to stay in my own lane because whatever differences they had, I wanted to stay away from that. So, but the difference between them, Tony might understand a little bit more about the business now than Dixie ever did. Dixie was never a big fan. She would watch it, but she was never a big fan. And so Dixie sometimes she wouldn't take control, like Tony won't take control. But when she did take control, she would call everybody together. I remember one time she called the whole crew together and said, if they didn't like it, they can walk out today. So I said, well, and there was a couple of guys just got up and left, not directly from the meeting. They went to see her and said they wanted to be released. And she said, okay, go. And we didn't hold anybody there that didn't want to be there. And Dixie was a mark for people like Huck and Bischoff, because he was with Huck, and Kurt Angle, and guys like that. Booker T was another one. If they were on WWE, they were much bigger stars than what TNA could ever produce, because they did a good job in getting their talent over. But again, you ran into, if they didn't bring their concerns directly to creative, they would go through Dixie. Mm-hmm. Then we would hear from it through Dixie, and which is a hard road to hoe. It's not a good way to do business.
So, having said that, with Tony Khan then, so, I mean, the very basic story is his dad was very rich and gave Tony a load of money. Still is very rich.
Still is.
And basically gave his son a load of money and just said, go have fun, do whatever you want. So he starts a wrestling company, and as far as running a wrestling company day to day, I know you've only met Tony once at a WWE show and you spoke to him once or twice here or there. But as far as you can tell, what are the differences between he and Dixie as far as how to run things, and how easy do you think it is for other wrestlers to manipulate Tony like they did with Dixie?
Well, I don't know. I haven't been around Tony that much, but I think it would probably be fairly easy, because Tony is the type, he doesn't want dissension. He doesn't want chaos, and that's exactly what he's ended up with, because he didn't take control of his own company. Dixie, on the other hand, she didn't want it either. But what Dixie would do, every time we would do TV, there was a bar at the hotel where we would stay every time we went down there. Embassy Suites, I think, somewhere. I think it was that. No, I'll think about it in a minute. But again, that was where we used to tell her the inmates cannot run the asylum. So we tried to tell her, listen, if they want to talk to us, let them come to us, not going through you and then you coming to us, because then we feel like we're being watched. That, since you brought it up, that it's like almost a go signal, get behind this guy. But and what was the question about Tony and Dixie? What was the question?
Is there any real difference between the two? Just as you were speaking then, I wanted to bring up that both seem like they want to be friends with the talent. And that could be a fatal mistake.
Oh, they do. They do. And similar, because, see, Tony didn't want to just be friends with him. He wants to be a booker. Didn't he get Booker of the Year with Meltzer that year?
Yeah, I think so. 3 times or something in a row, yeah.
And he wants to be a booker, which is good, which is fine. But he better think about I think they're making their money off TV, basically, because I don't think they could run enough shows to cover the cost of it. How much money did Tony Khan put in initially, his family?
I don't know. I mean, do you know what? It's probably 100 million.
That's quite a sum of money. $100 million.
Supposedly, he invested $20 million or so just to bring out the game. It's on all platforms, but the computer game that came out earlier this year, and they had a substantial investment in that I don't know if they've recouped their losses or not on that one. But he's probably invested about 100 million, with all the infrastructure and websites and talent and staff and mega parek hanging about backstage and stuff.
Well, see, Dixie never did any of that stuff. Tony is so stretched, so thin. He tries to do everything. That's where you got to have people in head of certain divisions so they can handle it. And then if they run into a problem, then they can bring it to your attention. Mm-hmm. I think Tony wants to handle everything. And I don't think there's enough hours in the day to do that. So if you want to bring a lot of stress onto yourself, try that for about a year. And Tony's been going 4 years. So, and I said on the podcast this week that I think he's getting a little bit bored with it and tired. And he may want to hand it over to somebody and see what they can do with it.
One more thing I just want to add very quickly, because I'd written this over a month ago because I finally got the name. Do you remember in the very early days of TNA, somebody was feeding the Jarrett's information that, wow, 80,000 people bought our weekly pay-per-views and so on and so forth?
I can't remember the guy's name.
I've written it.
What is it?
Jay Hassman.
Yep, that's him.
Yep, he was the guy apparently who was feeding this false information about pay-per-view purchases to the Jarrett's, and then they started overspending, and then they find out that they're making, I don't know, only a tenth of what they thought they were, and then it all falls apart, and then Dixie comes in.
After the first pay-per-view, that's when he hits them with the news. We did 80,000 buys, and I'm thinking, damn, it was like $35 or $40 per buy.
No. Of course, these were the cheapo ones. These were the $9.95 or $9.99 ones.
Okay,
we were doing the weekly pay-per-views, yeah.
Well, that'd be 800,000, wouldn't it?
Split that in half because
split it in half for the pay-per-view companies.
Yeah. Hey, but $400,000 a week coming in.
Well, that was good, but it's only good if it's true. Then the guy came in and told them, guys, I made a mistake, or somebody found out that was not the accurate number. The accurate number was like 8,000 or 9,000 buys, which figure that up, that's like 80,000.
Mm-hmm. Split in half.
And the bills were coming due. But before they found out that it wasn't true, I think they went out and they bought a lot of cameras, and I don't know if they bought a truck but they bought a lot of stuff to help, that they're going to need later on. And then they found out after they bought it that that's not the correct number. And they don't know what he was doing or how he got the wrong number. Of course, in the days of the conspiracy theories, they figured that Vince paid him to give the fake number so that they would feel real happy about themselves. And that's when Jeff and Jerry both were concerned about the future of the company. And that's why Jeff went to see Dixie personally and sat down at her office in Nashville and told her the problem. And she says, well, meet me in the morning and we will fly to Dallas and we will meet with my father and see what he thinks. And they did. They come up with a deal. He come back. And so we continued to run.